a medieval pilgrimage was a religious journey in which the destination and the journey itself had religious meaning. The destination could have been a shrine or a church, somewhere that had the relics of a saint or religious figure. The bones, clothing, remnants, anything that could be said to be divinely inspired. And you were making a journey there to show reverence, yes, but also many pilgrims went with the expectation of some kind of divine reward, whether that be the cure of an affliction or luck in business or war. But it's not just the destination, it's the journey. Just like today, how a long car ride can give you time to yourself to think about the life that you've led and what the future has in store. A pilgrimage was, in many ways, the chance to take a journey of introspection. And in a time where you really didn't have much luxury to take time for yourself. Many pilgrims took vows of silence, or solitude, or poverty, or fasting, because to them, what they did on the journey was part of it. It was showing the proper religious reverence for what they were undertaking. You know, after wearing military garb from so many different centuries, it's kind of refreshing to wear clothing where I'm carrying no weapons and none of this is meant for warfare. I'm traveling. And that's refreshing. You know, in the late medieval age, you really start to get a revolution in clothing and how things are worn. Up until this point, I've been wearing these long flowing garments that are then belted around the middle, really kind of one piece, with armor or something strapped over the top of it as a soldier. And that has been, until this point, the way clothing has been. But now comes the late medieval age, and there's an invention that just changes everything, and it changes everything about what I'm wearing. So what is this invention? It's the humble button. It's the button. Until this time, clothes have been long and unshapely, and whatever shape or fit they were given was due to being belted around the waist. Well, now the button has come into common usage, and that means clothing can be more tailored. So what you notice right off the bat is things get shorter, and there are more pieces involved, and you're getting to essentially have things that are more tailored to the human form, and it's all because buttons have come into existence. Let's talk about points. And we're not talking about points in a game. We're talking about points on clothes. Those are these ties that you see all over what I'm wearing. So, until this point in time, there was really no call for a mechanism for holding up your clothes. You were wearing one long blouse, essentially, that was buckled around the middle. You know, your body holds it up. Well, now, as you start getting tailoring and clothes are getting shorter, you find a need for essentially a way to keep your trousers up, way to keep your leggings up. And what they came up with was points, which is very interesting. Points are essentially ties, where you tie one bit of clothing to another. And for instance, I tie my leggings to this wool overcoat I've got. And that helps keep the leggings up. And you notice ties on my sleeves. That's when it gets hot, I can actually remove the sleeves. And you find pieces are really part of this late medieval revolution in clothing. It's not just a about religion, of course. Economics is a huge part of medieval pilgrimages. Just think about it. You have a flood of pilgrims moving from point A to point B. To get them there, they're going to need shelter. They're going to need food and water and guides, which means that all this has to be provided. So all along the way, every village between point A and point B, you have this entire industry that rises up just to service the medieval pilgrim. And that becomes a massive part of the medieval economy. Right down to the people on the streets selling religious trinkets to passers-by. It's a massive bit of the economy, which is actually why there was such a prevalence of fraud when it came to religious relics, icons, things of that nature, because if you could claim to have the pinky bone of a saint, then people would come visit. And if people would come to visit, your town could have economic prosperity. Although it shocks us today, what most people are drinking for sustenance is not water. Water sources could and often were contaminated. All you have to do is ask, say, a modern day camper or hiker, and look at the gear they take with them just to filter the water to make sure they don't get sick. And then you understand, it's like, okay, even drinking water is a risk. So most pilgrims would, if they're stopping for the night, they're stopping at a village or a way station, something that caters to pilgrims, and they're filling their water skins from a well that has been essentially proven not to be dangerous. But usually they're drinking something that has been fermented, something alcoholic, an ale, a cider, a mead, say, if you're making it from honey, something alcoholic, because that process is essentially making the water safe to drink. This would not be the highly concentrated alcoholic beverages we know today, but it also would not be just like drinking water. And that is something that we kind of don't talk a lot about when it comes to most of world history, is the part that fermented beverages played, because water was kind of a roll of the dice a lot of the times. So what do medieval pilgrims eat? Well, they're eating probably their big meals of the day at way stations. And if you're getting the sense that going on a pilgrimage was really not something the poor did, you'd be right on. Going on a pilgrimage actually costs quite a bit of money. But let's say you're taking a vow to live simply. What are you eating? Well, from way station to way station, or if there's a day or two between, it's just whatever you can carry in a pack, simply. So cheese is always a kind of a good option. Travels well. Pretty easy to make, very easy to find. Now, bread is kind of a staple of human existence. So what is a medieval pilgrim eating? You probably think, you get some idea of like he's got a crust. This is something that a medieval pilgrim, and to be honest, even a medieval nobleman, would have been unfamiliar with. This white, fluffy type bread that we have today. This would have been almost unheard of. And why? Well, to grind the grain, they're using essentially giant stone wheels that are grinding against stone sides. So, to be honest, most medieval people are eating bread that is just filled with stone flakes, things of that nature. You find when you look at medieval teeth that they're just ground down to just almost nothing, because they're eating this bread that's just filled with this stone detritus. So you're talking about something much more, something much more filled with bigger bits of grain, kind of a little bit rougher, a little bit darker. Even for medieval aristocrats, the kind of finer flour is not really something that you see until, to be honest, the last century. Meat is a little bit more of a luxury because it does not stay edible for very long. So is a medieval pilgrim eating meat on the trail, like a smoked meat or smoked fish? Probably not. Probably not, because there's really no cause for it. You have a way station not far away, or a village where you could eat fresh meat. So what would happen later on in, for instance, frontier societies, where people are smoking meat so it stays good longer to carry with them. A pilgrim is not necessarily worried about that. Because yes, while a pilgrim is journeying, they are not journeying with everything on their backs. They know that they're only trying to make it from point A to point B to point C to point D, and at every step, they're going to have a chance to essentially fill up. It's a lot like the modern highway system. You get off the highway, at any point, you're going to have a gas station, a motel, and a restaurant. And that's almost anywhere in the United States. You get off the interstate, you're going to have those things ready to service you. So, what do people carry with them in their cars? Snacks. Things to just get them here to there. As I'm walking through these woods, it brings to mind that when you have a flow of pilgrims moving from a set point to a set point, you know that these pilgrims are carrying wealth with them. Pilgrim roads are also perfect targets for robbers and brigands, and that was indeed a big problem during the medieval age. To such an extent that it was common for pilgrims to travel from point to point in giant caravans, just for protection. Now, of course, if you were an aristocrat going on pilgrimage, you went with your retainers and your warriors, almost like a small army. If you sought solitude in your pilgrimage, you could pay for that with your coin, perhaps your life. After wearing this clothing on the hike, although it was different to put on and felt quite different from what I had worn previously, I've got to say that this has been a very comfortable hike. Even with the full wool sleeves and wool overcoat that I obviously could unbutton or untie, and I think like I need to, this has been quite the comfortable hike. There is something to this style of clothing that perhaps in modern time we should look into, although people would probably frown on the fact that most of your underwear would be showing to the world, but surely we can overcome that difference. So I am wearing today, wrapped around my ankles and then my calf, essentially a series of just cloth wraps that essentially, they serve the purpose of basically keeping anything from getting between my leggings and my shoes and maybe causing some discomfort. They are virtually identical to the same kind of wraps that I would wear as a World War I soldier in the trenches. They call them puttees there. These are just wraps. But other than the color, they're almost identical. And just thinking, hundreds of years ago, they had come up with kind of that perfect way to keep your feet free of the detritus of your walk. And then centuries later, during World War I, when they needed to keep the same true, although they were thinking about mud at that point, what did they do? That's right, they brought back the poutine. The more things change, the more they stay the same.